Hello, my name is Teresa, and I'm going to read The Four Signs of a Dynamic Catholic and read excerpts from it. So, Chapter 1, Incredible Possibilities. Transforming people one at a time is at the heart of God's plan for the world. It is also essential to developing dynamic marriages, loving families, vibrant parish communities, thriving economies, and extraordinary nations. If you get the man right, or the woman, of course, you get the world right. Every time you become a better version of yourself, the consequences of your transformation echo through your marriage, family, parish, nation, and beyond, to people and places in the future. It is God who does the transforming, but only to the extent that we cooperate. God's grace is constant, never lacking. So our cooperation with God's desire to transform us is essential. It is the variable. Are you willing to let God transform you? Helping individuals with this transformation from who they are to who they're capable of being is the great work. Is the Catholic Church the best in the world at assisting men and women in becoming all God created them to be? Most people today would say no. We could argue about it, but we shouldn't have to. Should we be unquestionably the best in the world at this? I think so. Several years ago, I was having dinner with a group of priests in Minnesota before an event. I was the only non-cleric at the table, and some of the priests started talking about different things that were happening in their parishes. One of the priests was very young, and he was lamenting about how few people were actively involved at his parish. My mind was starting to drift towards what I was going to speak about at the event when I heard something that jolted me back into the moment. Sitting at the head of the table, like a king, was a warm, humorous, and completely down-to-earth priest who must have weighed 350 pounds and been almost 80 years old. Waving a finger down the table, he said to the young priest, "Listen, I have been the pastor of 7 parishes over the past 40 years, and I can tell you that it doesn't matter where you go. You will discover the same 50 people do everything in a parish." The comment got my attention. I immediately wondered if it was true. In the following weeks, I started to make informal phone calls to some pastors I knew. I asked them questions like, who are your most engaged parishioners? Why are they so engaged? What percentage of registered parishioners are actively involved in the parish? What percent of parishioners give regularly to the parish? The answers they gave me seemed to anecdotally support the priest's comment, but I wanted data. There's a concept known as the Pareto principle. It states in essence that roughly 80% of effort comes from 20% of causes. In business, the same concept is often referred to as the 80-20 principle. The idea is that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. For example, while Coca-Cola has literally billions of customers, its largest are the companies such as McDonald's, Marriott, and Delta Airlines, who serve millions of people Coca-Cola products every day. I'd always been curious about whether the 80-20 principle would apply to the church, and the priest's comments had piqued my curiosity. Did the rule hold true in Catholic parishes? The only way to find out for sure would be to obtain some hard data. Over the course of many months, I studied a series of parishes from coast to coast, examining 2 areas in particular: volunteerism and financial contribution. Both are significant signs of engagement. What I found left me speechless. Did the 80-20 principle hold true in Catholic parishes? No, not even close. This is what I discovered. 6.4% of registered parishioners contribute 80% of the volunteer hours in a parish. 6.8% of registered parishioners donate 80% of financial contributions. There is an 84% overlap between the 2 groups. I was amazed. Roughly 7% of Catholic parishioners are doing almost everything in their faith community and paying almost entirely for the maintenance and mission of the parish. This led me to the seminal question. What is the difference between engaged Catholics and disengaged Catholics? It came as a staggering surprise to discover that there was no significant research available on this question. For the rest of the book, I'll refer to these highly engaged parishioners as either the 7% or dynamic Catholics. There's so much that we can learn from them. It is, however, critical to understand before we go any further that generalizations can provide incredible insight, but they can also be very dangerous if taken too far or out of context. The 7% are by no means perfect, but there is something about them that is worth exploring. Most of them are not spiritual champions, and they would be the first to admit that. They are also often quick to point out that it doesn't take much to be at the top of the heap among Catholics today. The bar is not exactly set very high, but the 7% are the most highly engaged among us. I will refer to their less engaged counterparts as the 93%. At first, I found these results very discouraging, but it turns out this might be the best news the Catholic Church has received in decades. Why is it good news that only 7% of American Catholics are highly engaged? Well, think about the tremendous contributions that the Catholic Church makes every day in communities large and small across America and around the world. Every single day, we serve Catholics and non-Catholics around the world by feeding more people, housing more people, clothing more people, caring for more sick people, visiting more prisoners, and educating more students than any other institution on the planet. Now remember that all of this is less than 7% of our capability. That is good news. If just 7% of Catholics are accomplishing more than 80% of what we are doing today, imagine what 14% could do, not to mention what 21% or 35% could accomplish. Our potential is incredible. The Catholic Church is a sleeping giant. We literally have the power to change the world. For months after this discovery, I was constantly thinking about how we could go about increasing the number of dynamic Catholics in a parish. Then one day, the obvious finally occurred to me. We needed to do some research. We needed to find out what made the 7% different. What did the 7% do, think, and believe that is different from what the 93% do, think, and believe? The book in your hands holds the answer to that question. There are many things that make the 7% different from the rest of Catholics, but there are 4 things that the 7% have in common. I have named these 4 defining attributes and behaviors the 4 signs of a dynamic Catholic. These 4 signs are the life-giving spiritual habits that animate their lives. I'm convinced that if we work intentionally to help people develop vibrant spirituality through these 4 signs, we will see incredible things happen in their lives and in the life of the Church. The 4 signs, an overview. There are many ways to live out each of the 4 signs. I witnessed this among the people interviewed. The 4 signs are sufficiently focused to provide the intended result, and yet sufficiently broad to allow each person to approach them in his or her own way. Once again, let me point out that the 7% are by no means perfect. In fact, the research discovered many things about them that repel the 93%. The 7% do things that discourage others from becoming more engaged. They can be territorial, excluding others from joining groups or activities. They often speak in church language, and then that the 93% don't understand. They suffer from what I would call spiritual amnesia, meaning that they have forgotten or blocked out how resistant to God they were at different times in their own spiritual journey, or how far from God they have been at times in their lives. This spiritual amnesia robs them of the ability to relate to others who are less engaged. It also often makes them intolerant of less engaged Catholics, thinking that those people should just get with the program. Whatever shortcomings that 7% have can be overcome if they embrace the 4 signs more completely. The 4 signs are not only a model to re-engage disengaged Catholics, but also a model of continuous renewal even for the most highly engaged Catholics. The 4 signs of a dynamic Catholic are prayer, study, generosity, evangelization. These may not seem like any great discovery at first glance, What I find the most fascinating is the way dynamic Catholics approach each of these 4 signs. What I find most admirable is the almost unerring consistency with which they apply themselves to the 4 signs, especially the first and second, which is prayer and study. While I've dedicated a chapter to each of these signs, I think it'd be helpful to take a quick journey through the entire model as an overview. So, the first sign, prayer. Dynamic Catholics have a daily commitment to prayer. God is not a distant force to these people, but rather a personal friend and advisor. They are trying to listen to the voice of God in their lives and believe doing God's will is the only path that leads to lasting happiness in this changing world and beyond. Am I saying the other 93% of Catholics don't pray? No. Their prayer tends to be spontaneous, but inconsistent. The 7% have a daily commitment to prayer, a routine. Prayer is a priority for them. They also tend to have a structured way of praying. Many of them pray at the same time every day. For some, it means going to Mass in the morning, and for others, it means sitting down in a big, comfortable chair in a corner of their home or taking a walk, but they tend to abide by a structure. Some start by simply talking to God about their day. Others begin their prayer by reading from the Bible. Still others have a favorite devotional book that they begin with. When they arrive at the time and place in their day for prayer, they have a plan. It is not left to chance or mood. They have a habit of prayer, which they cling to with great discipline. The daily habit of prayer is a result of real spiritual work. Different things work for different people. Beginners in prayer struggle because they try one thing and it doesn't work and they get discouraged. Too many people don't have someone they can turn to and discuss the intricacies of developing a practical and sustainable prayer life. In most cases, the 7% have developed their routine of prayer painstakingly through trial and error over the course of decades. The second sign, study. Dynamic Catholics are continuous learners. On average, dynamic Catholics spend 14 minutes each day learning more about the faith. They see themselves as students of Jesus and his church and proactively make an effort to allow his teachings to form them. Jesus doesn't just want followers, he wants disciples. To be a Christian disciple means by sitting at the feet of Christ to learn. We all sit at the feet of someone to learn. Whose feet do you sit at? For some, it's a talk show host, and for others, it's a politician. For others still, it's a musician, an artist, a pastor, or a business leader. But none of these are a substitute for Jesus. The 7% are keenly interested in learning from Jesus and about Jesus. More than just a historic figure, he is seen as a friend, coach, mentor, and savior. They believe that Jesus teaches them through the scriptures, Christian tradition, and the church. Highly engaged Catholics read Catholic books, listen to Catholic CDs, watch DVDs about the faith, and tune in to Catholic radio and television programs. They go on retreats more regularly than most Catholics and attend spiritual events and conferences. They are hungry to learn more about the faith. They are continuous learners. It's also important to note that even though they tend to know much more about the faith than the 93%, they have a position of humility, which is a critical element of the second sign. If they disagree with a church teaching, they approach the issue in this way. Why does the church teach what she teaches? It is unlikely that I know better than 2,000